I'd like to tell you a story. And it's not my story. But it's a story that Jesus asked us to tell. Do you know what story that is? It's a story that happens in the middle of one of the darkest moments in human history. But the story is not about the ugliness that existed at that moment, but something bright and something important for all of us. So we're going to take a few minutes this morning and talk about the story. If you've got your Bible, open up to Matthew chapter 26. Let's talk about the darkness first. Beginning of Matthew 26 begins like this. When Jesus had finished all these words, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man is to be handed over for crucifixion." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people were gathered together in the court of the high priest named Caiaphas, and they plotted together to seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they were saying, "Not during the festival, otherwise a riot might occur among the people." If you skip down to verse 14, then one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and said to him, "What are you willing to give me to betray him to you?" And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver to him. From then on, he began looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus. We talk about a dark moment where within the city of God, among the people of God, in fact, in the very temple of God, the priests of God are plotting to murder the Son of God. And their biggest concern is politics. That's bad enough. But then one of the inner group, one of the ones that has been with Jesus from the beginning, one that has shared in even the miracles that Jesus gave them the ability to perform, goes to the chief priest and says, "How much are you willing to pay me to betray him?" And they promise him the price that you would pay for a wounded slave. Can humanity get any darker than that? But notice I skipped a whole section of verses there. Now this is where the story that Jesus wants us to tell is found. Now let me tell you why I know that this is a story Jesus wants us to tell. Look for a moment at verse 13. Listen to what he says. "Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of in memory of her." Jesus says, "I want you to tell this story. And when you do that, I want you to specifically remember this woman." We're going to identify her in a moment. Now, I want you to think about this. Think about the heroes that we know of in the Scriptures. Think about the men and the women of the Bible and what they have done. Is there any place that you can think of where Jesus specifically points out, "I want you to tell people what she did, and I want you to use her name"? No other place that I can think of that Jesus specifically says, "Remember her for this." Now I'm intrigued. Why would he single out these events this evening for such high praise and such eternal memorial? But it gets even stranger than that. Because the phrase that he uses here, there in verse 13, he says, "Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world," number one, he's anticipating the spread of the gospel to everyone. And this story is to be carried as they carry the gospel. But it's even more than that. This is a strange phrase when he says, "this gospel." What he almost says, not quite, but what he almost says is what this woman has done is the gospel. Now I'm really confused. How can it be that at a dinner one night, that something this woman did needs to be remembered throughout all of time? And not only that, but we hold up her name. So let's paint the picture. It is evening. It is a meal. And there is Jesus and the disciples and some guests at this home of Simon. And somewhere in this evening, something unusual happens. The woman in question, as when we put the other accounts together, is Mary. And somewhere in this evening, Mary comes into the room, and she has a container of oil. Remember, this is not a society that did a lot of bathing. So perfumes and oils were very important and very, very valuable. We're going to talk about the value of that in a moment. And you only used a little bit of very volatile oil. Immediately would fill, just a few drops would fill the room, and that would be the way you would typically use it, except she doesn't do that. She doesn't use it in its typical way. She actually breaks open the container and pours the entire contents on Jesus. The room would have been saturated with the aroma of this material. Immediately, the disciples seems to be led by Judas because he has very, shall we say, monetary reasons as he is stealing from the bag. He begins the objections, but it looks like the rest of the disciples kind of pile on. Why did she do this? Why? Look at the waste of this. And it was a considerable amount of money involved. When we read the accounts, we know that it was worth a laborer's wage for an entire year. A fantastic amount of money in this culture for a woman to have at her disposal. And they object. That was not the way to do that. Why would you do that? We could have sold it and fed it. And Jesus comes to her defense and says, leave her alone. What she has done is something wonderful. I don't understand. The events and the words that Jesus used, all of it seems to be so out of whack. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't follow a narrative. And for the disciples to react so viciously. I've often said that the world doesn't like extremes. They like you kind of middle of the road. If you're too good, they call you a crackpot. If you're too bad, they put you in jail. They like you kind of, 71 miles an hour down the road, just a little over the speed limit, not far. And what she has done is radical. It is extreme. And Jesus, coming to her defense, says this: Jesus, aware of this, says to them, "Why do you bother the woman? For she has done a good deed to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. For when she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial." And I want you to remember what she just did. So let's see if we can understand why Jesus takes this moment and captures it and says, "Do you see what just happened? I want you to tell this story for all time." That's what I need to pull apart and to understand. So we know who this is. Like I said, we can put the Mark and Luke account together and we know who this was. This was Mary. What do we know about Mary? Well, this is where we begin to see something of the significance of this event, because Mary is a disciple of Jesus. She has been interested in what he has been saying from the very beginning. She listens intensely, watches what he does. In fact, the first time we encounter her is when she is at her when Jesus comes to her sister's house for a meal. And there is Mary right in the middle of them, listening to what Jesus has to say. And Martha's off doing her thing, right? We all know this story. She's got guests in the house, and there's things to do, and dishes to prepare, and food to fix, and all the kinds of things. And she is worrying about all these things and running around, and she finally gets frustrated and asks Jesus directly, "Will you tell my sister to come and help me?" And probably one of the most gentle rebukes that Jesus gives, as he says, "Martha, Martha, she has selected, chosen the good things, in fact, the best things. Leave her be. Leave her be." Jesus has already come to Mary's defense once. She listens. She is a disciple. Maybe one of the most insightful disciples of all. I know there's something about this because of how he interacts with her a little bit later on. But here's the thing. I know that Mary is a disciple of Jesus, but I also know that Mary loves Jesus. Do you know how I know that? I know that because Mary doesn't only have a sister by the name of Martha, but she's got a brother. You remember that? And his name is Lazarus. Just a few months before, Lazarus was sick. Terribly sick. And you can imagine what that was like as you watched someone that you care about and someone who means so much to you dying, especially when there is this thought in her head of Jesus was here. He could heal him. It would be okay. But that's not the way it happened. Jesus delayed in coming, and it was too late. Her brother died. In John chapter 11, we pick up that story. Jesus comes afterwards. And the first person that he gets to interact with in this account is not Mary, but Martha. The one that was so busy working on the house and getting the meal together and all the things that immediately occupied her. But there is something powerful about being in that raw state where you're grieving for the one that you love so much and is gone, is that the mundane things have fallen away. And maybe this is the opportunity to penetrate through to Martha about what Jesus is really about. Because Martha comes to Jesus, verse 21, this is John 11. Martha then says to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha says to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. There is this hope, this faith out there to understand that there is something out there. What is it? And Jesus brings it into focus when he says, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. And he who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Right into, it would seem, to into her eyes. Do you believe this? He says to Martha. He said to her, she said to him, yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. She gets there. She gets there. When she says this, she leaves and quietly tells Mary, the Master's asking for you. And Mary gets up from the morning, and as she does this, she does so abruptly, it would seem, and a whole lot of the mourners go, she's going to go mourn at the tomb. We're going to go with her. We're not going to leave her in this time of grief and hurt. And they go with her, except she doesn't go to the tomb, she goes to Jesus. And we have this almost perfect recreation of what Martha says. When she, in verse 30, now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but he was still in the place where Martha met him. And when the Jews were with her in the house and consoling her, and they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, not where they thought, she saw him and fell at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Jesus doesn't repeat a single word that he said to Martha. Do you know why? He didn't need to. Mary got it. She knew who Jesus was. She had been listening. She had been watching. She got it. And the only words that it would seem that Jesus could say at that moment is, show me where you laid him. And one of the most powerful, simple verses, as Jesus watches the grief of Mary and Martha and the people around, it simply says, Jesus wept. But that, of course, is not the end of that story either. They get to the tomb. He insists that it be opened, even though it could be very unpleasant. And as only Jesus could do. I have often wondered what the tone of this statement is. I have heard preachers talk about this verse with a booming voice, invoking the thunder. I'm not sure that's the way it is. To me, it's like Jesus is calling out to his friend. Lazarus! Lazarus! Come on out. come forth. And there he is. He's alive. Mary may have prepared the body for burial, and there he is alive. And that night that we're talking about from Matthew 26, do you know who's there? Lazarus is there. I want you to think about this for a moment. There they are having a meal. And at some point in time, Lazarus reaches across to pick up something from the table, and Mary and Lazarus brush hands. And Mary remembers, not too long ago, that hand had been cold and stiff in death. And the eyes, lifeless, but now they kind of twinkled with, brother, sister, I want that piece. Or something. But he's alive, and he's at that table, and he's taking part in this. Mary loved Jesus. But Jesus is saying something incredible, and it's easy to miss. At the beginning of Matthew chapter 26, he is telling the disciples, they're going to kill me. They're going to kill me. They're going to take me and kill me in one of the most horrible ways man has ever invented. They're going to kill me. And it may be that the only person that truly believes that in the room is Mary. They're going to kill him. They're going to kill him. What do you do? What can I do? Mary doesn't have political power. She doesn't have wealth to throw around and somehow divert. What can I do? Mary thinks. And so if it wasn't in that house, if it was close by, I imagine Mary running out and going to her home and getting the most precious thing that she owned. This vial of perfume that was worth so much money. And she comes back into the presence of Jesus, and she doesn't want to hold anything back. Nothing to be held back at all. And she smashes it open and pours every drop of the contents out on Jesus. And immediately the uproar of the disciples, there's nothing. And Jesus says, you stop. What she has done for me is important, so important. I want you to tell the story everywhere you go. But why? Here is, I believe, the explanation of that. And it starts with a simple fact. One we've already talked about. Mary loved Jesus. But I know something else. Jesus loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus and Peter and John. And he loves you. And he loves me. He knows us. But more than that, he knows the fate that awaits us because of sin. We are going to die. But love says, I can't just let that stand without doing something. What could he do? The perfume was inside of what they called an alabaster container, which is a soft stone that can easily be shaped and often was made in containers. Well, Jesus acquires a container himself. He acquires a human body, filling it absolutely to the top with the most precious essence in all of the universe. He fills it with God himself. Jeff talked about that beautiful passage in Hebrews 1. perfect representation of God, filling that container. And then what does he do? He smashes it on the cross. Everything given, everything poured out, nothing held back. For you, for me, for Mary. And Jesus says, there'll be times where it's hard to comprehend eternity and heaven and angels and the history that goes along with the scriptures. And there's many things, and every one of us in here has wondered about certain passages and certain ideas and things, and what is God like, and so many. I'll tell you where to start. Where to start with yourself and where to start with your friends. Take something that is familiar. The love of a woman that would give all that she has because of that love. I can understand that. I can appreciate that. I can honor that. And if I can understand Mary, her love, and why she acted the way she did, Jesus says, if you can understand that, you can understand me. You can understand why I did what I did. Because it's for you. Let me tell you, Jesus loves you that much. And Jesus says, take this simple story and tell it for all eternity. But when you do, make sure somewhere in there you say, you know who that was? You know who it was that understood what was about to happen and the significance of it and acted with the same passion and the same thought and the same self-sacrifice that I'm about to? Remember her name. Speak her name for all eternity. Tell people the story of Mary, the story of love. That's what we're about. Telling the love of Jesus. If there's somebody here that's not a part of that story, we would encourage you to make that choice. We want to, if you don't know the story other than what we just said, give us a chance to talk to you. If we can help you become a part of that, or if you've been struggling with your faith in these difficult times, let us know so that we can encourage you. And that includes those that are watching at home. Don't suffer alone. Let us know what we can do to help you. If there is some way, why don't you come up front while we stand and sing our invitation song.